First question, Martin, is OpenTelemetry has been steadily gaining adoption over the past, not that long, couple of years. And with a lot of organizations you've seen and we've seen increasingly rejecting this kind of unstandardized approach to observability and trying to stick to open standards. What do you predict for the rest of 2022 in terms of this further shift to open standards, open protocols, and I guess most specifically, OpenTelemetry?
Yeah, great question, Chris. I think, as you rightly pointed out, I think the shift to open standards generally for the observability space has been happening over the last few years. We definitely see that on the metric side, at least with the Prometheus format there. Logs slightly less so, but at least there's a lot of standardization in the collection agents and things like that through FluentBit and FluentD. But I think OpenTelemetry in particular is one that is gaining very quickly sort of standardization. I think there's probably a few reasons for that. If you think about just that as one of the three data types, tracing is generally the newer data type. So you can imagine has the least amount of baggage, unlike logging and perhaps metrics. So it's perhaps the easiest one to get open source sort of adoption on. And I think that sort of helps it a little bit for sure. Tracing is also different, and especially distributed tracing is also different from the perspective that, if you think about metrics and logs, a single team, and excuse the background noise, my dog is going a little bit nuts right now, but a single team, it struggles to get value out of distributed tracing, right? Unlike metrics and logs, where if you're a single team, single use case, you can instrument using the open source standards and that team can get value out of it. Distributed tracing is a little bit different in the sense that it's not just one service or your own application. You really need that context propagated through all of the microservices, the end-to-end of the flow. So I think for that, it is even more important, more critical that these standards are sort of applied across the whole stack to really get the value out of it. So I think for all those reasons is probably the reason why, if you see what's happening with the industry right now, all of the even proprietary vendors are getting behind this one standard there, because it sort of benefits not just the end users, but it benefits all of these vendors as well, that all of the pieces of software in the industry now sort of propagate this context. And more so, if you can standardize the instrumentation there and the propagation, it actually helps, again, both the end user side and the vendor side as well. So I think for all of those reasons, probably why it's been speeding up a lot. And I think what we'll see this year and what we've been seeing as we talk to companies out there is that it's gaining critical mass in the sense of most of the different client libraries and the different languages are instrumented now. The sort of agent and collection agents are there, and people are actually using it for real world production use cases. And it has this sort of the weight behind it from both sides, from the end user side and the sort of the vendor side as well. So I think for all those reasons, we do see that it's gaining a lot of traction this year. We'll probably hit sort of critical mass. And again, I think all of this is great for the end users, right? Because it means that you don't now need to care about which perhaps vendor or open source solution you use to store the data. At least you do the instrumentation once, and that should future-proof you depending on what other decision you make down the track. So great result for end users, I would say for sure. And I do see that this is probably the year that sort of critical mass bit flips. But yeah.
Why do you think it's this year in particular?
Yeah, there's nothing about, I would say, 2022 in particular. I think it's just one of those things where, it's not just the standard. I think the standard, as you rightly said, was created a few years ago, but the critical mass of are there enough different clients and enough different programming languages out there, thus that you can actually propagate the thing. And as I mentioned earlier, it's
all
one
the
of these things
that are needed have come together.
Right. And it's harder than something like metrics and Prometheus, again, because you sort of need the whole end-to-end request flow board in, and that's much harder. And I think we're getting to the point where there's enough of these clients that make it possible. And we've just been seeing, we've been seeing companies attempt to do this for many years now. We're actually seeing a higher rate of success in at least the instrumentation side of things this year. So, nothing special about 2022, I think, and no major single event, but it is a culmination of years of things that are happening in the industry to get to this point. We're starting to see that now.
In this sort of the three data points you mentioned earlier, are there any other emerging open standards that are worth keeping an eye on, maybe into 2023?
Yeah, for sure. So, as mentioned earlier, Prometheus is probably the one for the metrics standard protocol now. We're seeing that in the industry as well, whereas most pieces of software have a native Prometheus integration. And as people adopt cloud native, it seems to be the protocol of choice. So that's definitely sort of quickly becoming the standard for the metric data type. I think what you're seeing from a vendor perspective out there is that everybody has support for it, right? So from that perspective, generating the data in Prometheus format in a similar way to generating data in an OpenTelemetry format is probably the best move for end users out there to make, because a lot of the vendor platforms can handle it and have support for it. I think what's different about that is, unlike OpenTelemetry, where there isn't like a standard query language or way of beyond storing the tracing data, there isn't a standard way to manipulate the data. Whereas in Prometheus, there's a standard query language, and we see that that's probably where it's a little behind OpenTelemetry, because each of the vendors have their own way of querying this data once you produce. So you get some protection there, but it's not quite as standardized in that sense. But
yeah, and that's where they get the opportunity to differentiate, which is good.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.